G'day mate, 40 here. Listening to the Bob Woodward book, War, and it frequently outlines how angry the Biden administration gets with Bibi Netanyahu and Israel. And some obvious points just come up. One, the United States is probably overly involved in the Middle East. It's hard to see how the United States has any vital U.S. strategic interests in the Middle East now that the U.S. is energy independent. So if Hamas kills 1,200 Israeli civilians on October 7, 2023, right, that doesn't affect the lives of Americans, most Americans, right? America's national security interests are not shifted by that. If Israel, in response, kills 40,000 Gazans, again, that doesn't affect the lives of most Americans. So whatever has happened between Gaza and Israel doesn't affect the well-being of the overwhelming majority of Americans. If Israel wipes out Hezbollah, or Hezbollah inflicts massive damage on Israel, it's hard to see exactly how that affects the lives of American or vital American national security interests. If Israel bombs Iran or Iran bombs Israel, it's hard to see how that affects vital American strategic interests. Right? The lives of the overwhelming majority of Americans will be completely unaffected. So when you get overly involved in something, it's very easy to get angry. When you try to micromanage a war, as the Biden administration is trying to do with Israel, that will inevitably lead to frustration because wars tend to escalate. Wars are very difficult to micromanage. You have to have hubris to think that you can micromanage Israel's 7 fronts of war. But the Biden administration does not lack for hubris. Joe Biden took it on as his responsibility to get Israel's captives home. And then he was just setting himself up for failure. I think traditionalists, conservatives, nationalists understand that wars escalate and that it's very hard to micromanage them because you're dealing with all sorts of visceral emotions and loyalties, tribal loyalties, racial loyalties, religious loyalties. People feel like they're fighting for their life. It verges on the impossible to try to micromanage such conflicts, and you're only asking for frustration and anger. So you don't hear people in the Biden administration engage in any introspection whether they've set themselves up for failure, whether their anger and disappointment and frustration and outrage and exhaustion is caused by their own approach. There's zero introspection on that score. And if you're constantly angry and frustrated and tired, there's probably something in your approach that's not working. There's likely some aspect of reality that you're denying. So I see a lot of people who set themselves out on some heroic quest, and they see themselves engaged in heroic tasks at work, and that's why they're not doing the work on time that was assigned to them by their supervisors, because they know better. They're engaged in a heroic mission. And then people get disciplined and fired, and they just get frustrated and angry, and they don't examine to what degree am I responsible. Right? Your work will usually not require heroic measures on your behalf. If you're engaged in heroic struggles at work and your supervisors are frustrated and angry with you and saying that your performance needs to improve, but you just know better, right? You know better than the boss. You know better than your superiors. You are on a righteous mission, and so you're going to direct your time as you see fit at work as opposed to what your supervisors are telling you. That's just only going to result in failure. And you hear the toll of Israel's walls taking on the Biden administration foreign policy team, from Joe Biden to Anthony Blinken and to others. They're just running themselves ragged, absolutely exhausted, but never engaging in any introspection in to what degree am I responsible for this? To what degree is our policy unrealistic? What aspects of reality are we denying? Right? If they were less hands-on, if they did less micromanaging, right, they'd be much less likely to get frustrated and angry with Israel. Trying to micromanage Ukraine's war with Russia will similarly just result in frustration, anger, and bitter feelings on all sides. When people are fighting for their survival, they're not in a space where they're going to take micromanagement from people on the other side of the world. It's not how the world works. And so, from a traditional perspective, human nature is not basically good. Wars of survival, very difficult to micromanage by outsiders. People are overwhelmingly tribal and national and racial in their loyalties. And these seem to be basic elements of reality that the Biden administration foreign policy team is consistently denying.